Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Look, there are a lot of strange sights at Orbital Station Meridian 5. It's one of those places where the entire galaxy seems to funnel through on any given rotation. Merchants hawking goods from 12 different star systems, diplomats pretending they're not spying on each other, and tourists who really should have read the travel warnings before booking passage to the Outer Rim. The station had seen it all. Gelatinous blobs negotiating trade agreements, 4 armed jugglers performing for spare credits. That one time, a Altherian prince tried to bring his pet singularity through customs, which, spoiler alert, did not go well for anyone involved. But even by Meridian 5's standards, Lieutenant Fiona walking through the main transit hub with 2 Faler cubs perched on her shoulders like oversized carnivorous parrots? That was new. And let's be clear about what Faler are, shall we? These aren't your garden-variety apex predators. They're not even your Death World apex predators. Faler are what happen when evolution looks at the concept of a killing machine and says, you know what? Let's add more teeth and crystalline eyes that can see in 17 different spectrums. Oh, and make them smart enough to hold grudges. Adult Faler stand about 3 meters at the shoulder, possess 6 limbs tipped with retractable claws that can shred durasteel, and have been known to take down armored vehicles when they're feeling particularly annoyed. Their homeworld is classified as extreme hazard, military insertion only, and even the military doesn't like going there. So when Fiona, all 1.6 meters of her, wearing a standard fleet jumpsuit and carrying a duffel bag like she'd just gotten back from a camping trip, strolled through the arrival gate with 2 of these creatures draped across her shoulders, people noticed. The cub on her left shoulder, the one with the slightly darker scales and curious tilted head, was Ripple. He had his snout pressed against the transperisteel observation window, watching ships dock and undock with the fascination of a child seeing starships for the first time. Which, to be fair, he basically was. His tail, thick as a human arm and covered in those distinctive crystalline scale patterns, swished back and forth with enough force to occasionally smack Fiona in the back of the head. She didn't seem to mind. The cub on her right shoulder was Thorne, and Thorne had opinions. Specifically, his opinion was that everyone and everything in the transit hub was beneath his notice and probably not worth the effort of eating. He had his eyes half closed in that supremely judgmental way that cats throughout the universe have perfected. And every so often he'd let out a rumbling sound that was somewhere between a purr and distant thunder. One massive paw rested on top of Fiona's head, claws carefully retracted, like he was claiming ownership of this particular human. Fiona, for her part, looked entirely unbothered by the fact that she was wearing approximately 200 kilograms of apex predator as accessories. She had that particular expression that veteran spacers develop, the one that says she'd seen weirder things before breakfast and would probably see weirder things after lunch. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and there was a small scratch on her cheek that was definitely fresh. Probably from when Ripple got excited about something and forgot that personal space was a thing. The crowd parted around her like a school of fish avoiding a shark, which was ironic, really, because Fiona wasn't the dangerous one in this scenario. Well, mostly. She made it about 30 meters into the main concourse before the inevitable happened. "Halt!" The voice had that particular quality that only career security personnel can achieve. The perfect blend of authority, suspicion, and the barely suppressed desire to make someone else's day significantly more complicated. It belonged to Officer Grix, a Moltaran who took his job with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for bomb disposal or hostage negotiation. Grix had 8 compound eyes, which meant he could see approximately everything all the time, and he used this ability to spot regulation violations with terrifying efficiency. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the station's lighting, and his 4 arms were already reaching for various items on his equipment belt. Scanner, datapad, probably a citation printer, because Grix loved his paperwork. Fiona stopped walking. Ripple perked up, interested in this new development. Thorne cracked one eye open, assessed the situation, and clearly decided it wasn't worth his full attention yet. "Identification!" Grix demanded, scuttling forward on his 6 legs. His translator rendered his clicks and chirps into perfectly clipped galactic standard. Clearance papers, biocontainment certification, diplomatic permits for the transport of dangerous xenofauna. Fiona reached into her jacket pocket, slowly, because sudden movements around nervous security officers rarely ended well, and produced her ID chit. "Lieutenant Fiona, Independent Fleet, Cargo Specialist, just passing through." Grix's multiple eyes scanned the chit, then swiveled to focus on the cubs. All 8 eyes. At once. It was deeply unsettling, which was probably the point. The creatures. Documentation. Now. "They're with me," Fiona said, in the tone of someone discussing the weather. There was a pause, the kind of pause that happens when someone's brain needs a moment to process information that doesn't quite compute with reality as they understand it. "They are with you," Grix repeated slowly, each word its own sentence. "That is not documentation. That is a statement of physical proximity, which I can observe with my own visual apparatus. I require—" "They don't need to be cleared," Fiona interrupted, and there was something in her voice now. Not quite hard, but firm. The pre-B voice of someone who'd had this conversation before and wasn't particularly interested in having it again. "They're with me." Ripple chose this moment to yawn, which was adorable right up until you noticed that his mouth opened wide enough to fit a bowling ball inside and contained multiple rows of serrated teeth designed to tear through armored hide. The yawn was accompanied by a squeaking sound that might have been cute if it hadn't echoed slightly in the cavernous space. Grix's antennae flattened against his head. Around them, other security personnel were taking notice. Hands drifted toward weapons. The general ambient noise of the transit hub dropped by several decibels as people suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. "Ma'am," Grix said, and his translator couldn't quite mask the clicking distress in his underlying voice. "Those are Falshear. Juvenile Falshear, yes, but still classified as Class 5 dangerous predators under galactic transit regulations. Subsection 48, paragraph." "They're babies," Fiona said flatly. "They are predators from a death world that can and will consume live prey up to 3 times their body mass," Grix countered. His mandibles were clicking rapidly now, a sign of extreme agitation. "I cannot allow." Thorne, apparently deciding that his nap was being interrupted by this tedious conversation, made a sound. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of sound that bypasses the brain's logical centers and speaks directly to the primitive hindbrain, the part that still remembers when humans were prey animals hiding in trees. It was a sound that said, in a language older than words, "I am a predator, and you are made of meat." Every security officer in the immediate vicinity suddenly had their weapons drawn. Grix's carapace flushed a pale shade that probably indicated fear in Moltaran physiology. A Torellian merchant dropped her packages. Somewhere, an alarm system was deciding whether this situation qualified as a threat. Fiona reached up, still calm, still unbothered, and scratched behind Thorne's ear ridge. You know, the place where scales met softer skin and apparently contained some kind of universal off switch for bad attitudes. Thorne's rumbling immediately shifted from landslide to distant motorboat, and he pressed his head into her hand with enough force that Fiona had to brace herself. "See," she said to Grix. "Babies." "That does not—" Grix started. "Is there a problem here, officer?" The new voice cut through the tension like a plasma torch through butter. It was deep, resonant, and carried the kind of authority that comes from being very large and very accustomed to being obeyed. The crowd, which had been slowly creeping back to gawk at the spectacle, suddenly reversed direction at speed. Commander Oolix was what adult Faler looked like, and he was exactly as terrifying as advertised. 3 meters of scaled muscle and controlled lethality moving through the transit hub with the fluid grace of a creature that had never met a predator it couldn't eat. His scales were darker than the cub's, marked with pale scars that told stories of battles won. His crystalline eyes, currently focused on the security checkpoint with uncomfortable intensity, glowed faintly in the station's lighting. When he moved, people dove out of the way. This wasn't the nervous parting that Fiona had received. This was pure survival instinct. He wore the insignia of the Faler military, which technically made him subject to station security. Practically speaking, it made him someone you absolutely did not want to argue with, unless you had a death wish and excellent life insurance. Grix made a sound that his translator wisely decided not to interpret. Several of his arms gestured in what might have been placation or possibly surrender. "Commander," Grix managed, "I was attempting to enforce standard security protocols regarding the transport of dangerous—" Oolix wasn't looking at Grix. He was looking at Fiona. Specifically, he was looking at Fiona and the 2 cubs, and his expression was doing something complicated. Then, in a move that made every witness question their understanding of Faler behavior, he lowered his head. Not much, but enough. It was a gesture of respect, possibly even deference, and it was so unexpected that someone in the crowd gasped. "Pack Guardian," Oolix said, and his voice carried a warmth that seemed impossible from a creature that could bite a person in half. "It is good to see you well. And the younglings, they thrive." Ripple's head snapped around at the sound of Oolix's voice, and he made a chirping sound that was absolutely delighted. Thorne's eyes opened fully for the first time, and his tail started swishing faster. Fiona's stern expression cracked into a genuine smile. "Commander, I didn't know you were stationed here." "Temporary assignment, diplomatic escort." Oolix moved closer, and if you didn't know better, you'd think he was being careful. Gentle, even. He lowered his massive head toward the cubs, and they both reached out with their front paws, touching his snout in what was clearly a greeting. "They have grown." "Like weeds," Fiona agreed, "and they eat like it, too. Do you have any idea how much raw protein 2 growing Faler cubs consume per rotation?" "I raised 6 siblings," Oolix said, and there might have been amusement in his tone. "I am aware." Grix's eyes were swiveling between them so fast it looked like they might fall out. "Commander, I don't understand. This human has no clearance to transport—" "She needs none," Oolix said, not looking away from Fiona. "Pack Guardian status supersedes standard transit regulations. The younglings are under her protection, by clan law and by right of deed." Now he did turn to look at Grix, and his tone shifted into something far more formal, far more final. 6 months passed. Human pirates raided a Faler settlement world. They killed the adults, intended to sell the younglings to collectors. Lieutenant Fiona intercepted their vessel. Alone. Freed 8 cubs. Killed 4 pirates. Returned the surviving cubs to their clans. 3 pirates, Fiona corrected quietly. The 4th one was, well, Ripple was hungry. Oolix made a sound that might have been approval. These 2 cubs lost their bloodline. No clan would claim them. Tradition demands that orphaned younglings without clan ties be granted mercy death rather than face dishonor. The air seemed to get heavier, colder. Lieutenant Fiona, Oolix continued, claimed them instead. She invoked Pack Guardian right, which no human has done before. She is not their mother. She is their protector. By our oldest laws, that is a stronger bond. Thorne, apparently feeling that this was all very dramatic and taking attention away from his nap, made a grumbling sound and adjusted his position on Fiona's shoulder. Ripple had gone back to watching the ships, already bored with the conversation. Grix's antennae were doing complicated things. His mandibles clicked in what might have been an attempt to process this information through the rigid structure of his regulation-focused worldview. Finally, he managed, "This is highly irregular." "Yes," Fiona agreed. "There should be paperwork." "Probably. Forms, certifications, multiple levels of approval." "I'm sure you're right." Grix's eyes swiveled to Oolix, perhaps hoping for support in his bureaucratic crisis. Oolix stared back with the flat, patient expression of a predator waiting for prey to stop moving. "They," Grix tried one last time, gesturing at the cubs, "are dangerous." "Yes," Fiona said simply, "to people who threaten them, or me." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you planning to threaten us, officer?" There was a very long pause. "No," Grix said weakly. "Then we don't have a problem." Fiona adjusted her duffel bag on her shoulder, which required some maneuvering around Thorne's bulk. "I'm meeting someone at the main mess hall. Commander, will you walk with us? The cubs would love to catch up." Oolix fell into step beside her as she walked past the security checkpoint. Grix and his fellow officers parted like water, weapons lowering, expressions ranging from confused to awed to deeply, deeply concerned about the paperwork this was going to generate. As they moved deeper into the station, Ripple resumed his fascinated observation of everything around them, and Thorne settled back into his judgmental nap. Fiona walked with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous her companions were and had made peace with it long ago. "You have caused quite the incident, Pack Guardian," Oolix observed, his tone dry. "It's a rotation ending in day," Fiona replied. "I cause incidents. It's basically my job description at this point." "The younglings? They are well? Truly?" The question was casual, but there was weight behind it. Real concern. Fiona's expression softened slightly. "They're good. Ripple's curious about everything, which is exhausting, but means he's learning. Thorne pretends he doesn't care about anything, but he's the first one to check the perimeter when we're somewhere new. They're safe. They're fed. They're loved." Oolix finished quietly. Fiona didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was careful. "They're Pack. That's what matters." They walked in companionable silence for a moment, the massive Falshir warrior and the human lieutenant with 2 cubs on her shoulders. Around them, the station's population flowed and eddied, giving them space, staring but not approaching. Sometimes, the narrator thought, the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy know exactly who not to mess with. And sometimes, just sometimes, the scariest thing in the room is the person those creatures choose to follow. This was about to become a very interesting rotation. The main mess hall on Meridian 5 was less a cafeteria and more a controlled experiment in chaos theory. Picture, well, actually, Don't picture anything, just observe. A space roughly the size of a small hangar, filled with tables and seating, adapted for approximately 60 different species' anatomical requirements. The air was a collision of smells: Torellian spice paste, Altherian sulfur supplements, human coffee that could probably strip paint, and something that might have been food or might have been a biochemical weapon, depending on your perspective and respiratory system. Fiona navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, Ripple and Thorne still perched on her shoulders like the world's most dangerous fashion statement. Oolix had departed at the entrance, something about diplomatic obligations, but not before giving the cubs one more affectionate greeting that involved a lot of purring and head-bumping. Watching a 3-meter killing machine act like a doting uncle was surreal enough that several onlookers had taken photos. Those would be showing up on galactic social media within the hour, probably with captions like, "Human casually adopts apex predators. More at 11. Lieutenant Ferris was waiting at a table near the viewport, and her expression when she spotted Fiona was absolutely priceless. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened, closed, opened again, and finally settled on a grin that was equal parts delight and disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," Ferris said as Fiona approached. "Fiona, what? And I cannot stress this enough. The actual hell?" "Language," Fiona said mildly, settling into a seat. "There are children present." Ripple immediately began investigating the table's surface, sniffing at Ferris's half-eaten meal with intense interest. Thorne, demonstrating his characteristic enthusiasm for everything, cracked one eye open to assess whether Ferris was a threat, decided she wasn't, and went back to his nap. "Children," Ferris repeated flatly. She had the look of someone whose entire understanding of reality was being gently but firmly dismantled. "Those are Falshire cubs. Emphasis on Falshire. Emphasis on cubs that will grow up to be able to bite through reinforced hull plating." "They're very well behaved," Fiona said, gently pushing Ripple's snout away from Ferris's plate. Ripple made a disappointed sound but retreated. "Mostly." "How long have you— when did you—" Ferris gestured helplessly at the cubs. "Start from the beginning. Use small words. My brain is broken." So Fiona explained. The pirate raid 6 months back. The cubs in cages, destined for some collector's private menagerie or worse. The brief, violent boarding action that left 3 pirates very dead, and 1 pirate very digested. The 8 cubs freed, 6 returned to their clans, and these 2, Ripple and Thorne, with nowhere to go because Falshire tradition was harsh about orphans without clan ties. "They were going to euthanize them," Fiona said quietly, scratching behind Ripple's ear. "Called it mercy. Said it was kinder than letting them live without honor or clan status." "So you just— what? Adopted them?" "Invoked Pack Guardian right." Oolix explained the legal framework. "Basically made me responsible for their care and upbringing until they're old enough to choose their own path." Fiona shrugged. "Seemed like the obvious choice." "The obvious choice," Ferris said slowly, "was to adopt 2 apex predators from a death world. They were babies. They needed someone." Fiona's voice had gone firm again, that same tone she'd used with Grix. "What was I supposed to do? Let them die?" Ferris looked at her friend for a long moment, then her expression softened. No, I guess you couldn't." She reached out carefully, letting Ripple sniff her hand. When he didn't immediately try to remove her fingers, she cautiously scratched under his chin. Ripple's purring increased in volume. "Where are you taking them?" "There's a protected sanctuary world in the outer reaches, place called Refuge. They take in orphaned or displaced xenofauna, give them safe territory to grow up in." It's run by, well, well, what have we here? The voice was smooth, cultured, and carried the kind of artificial warmth that immediately set off every alarm bell in Fiona's head. She looked up to see Merchant Lord Grimm oozing, literally, given his physiology, toward their table. Illyrians looked like someone had tried to design a slug using only expensive materials. Iridescent skin that shimmered with implanted jewels, multiple eye stalks adorned with golden rings, a body that moved in ways that made human stomachs uncomfortable. Grimm was dressed in the Illyrian equivalent of formal business wear, which involved a lot of silk wrappings and probably cost more than Fiona made in a year. He was also, according to every instinct Fiona had developed over years of dealing with the galaxy's less savory elements, absolutely someone to avoid. Falshir cubs, Grimm observed, his translator rendering his natural slime gurgle into smooth galactic standard. How extraordinary! How utterly delightful! His eye stalks swiveled to focus on Fiona. You are their handler, I presume? I'm their guardian, Fiona corrected, her voice carefully neutral. Ah, yes, of course. Guardian. Grimm's mouth parts arranged themselves in what might have been a smile. How admirable. How very human of you, really, taking in strays. It speaks to your species' charming naivety about the galaxy's economic realities. Ferris's hand drifted toward her belt. Fiona gave her a tiny shake of the head. I happen to be a collector, Grimm continued, uninvited, sliding closer. Rare specimens, unique creatures, that sort of thing. Very upscale clientele. Very exclusive. And Falshir cubs, especially orphaned ones without clan protection, those are remarkably valuable on the exotic markets. They're not for sale, Fiona said flatly. Everything is for sale, my dear, at the right price. Grimm's eye stalks focused on the cubs with an intensity that made Fiona's jaw tighten. I could offer you, let's say, 30,000 credits. Each. That's 60,000 total. More money than a fleet cargo specialist sees in 5 years. Thorne's eye opened. Not both eyes, just one. He looked at Grimm with the kind of focus that predators reserve for things they're considering eating. Not interested, Fiona said. 60,000 is my opening offer, naturally. I could go as high as— No! Grimm's friendly demeanor slipped slightly. You don't understand the opportunity you're refusing. These creatures will grow large, dangerous, expensive to feed and maintain. You cannot possibly provide them the care they require. I, however, have facilities, expertise. I could give them— Cages, Ferris interrupted coldly. You could give them cages. Maybe sell them to someone who wants a conversation piece that can kill on command. Grimm's attention shifted to Ferris, and his tone cooled considerably. I am a licensed merchant operating within all legal parameters. What I do with my acquisitions is my concern. Back to Fiona. I am trying to be reasonable, but I should mention that I have connections, influence. If I wanted to file a complaint about unlicensed transport of dangerous xenofauna, if I wanted to push for confiscation and auction. Ripple had stopped investigating the table. Thorne's other eye had opened. Both cubs were now looking at Grimm with absolute, unwavering attention. The temperature in the immediate area seemed to drop. Fiona didn't move, didn't restrain them, didn't speak. She just sat there, calmly, while her meal grew cold, and Grimm slowly realized that he'd made a tactical error. See, here's the thing about Falshir cubs that most people don't understand. They're not stupid. They're frighteningly intelligent, actually, even at this age, and they absolutely understand tone, body language, threat assessment. They knew Grimm was a threat to their pack guardian. They knew he wanted to take them away, from her. And they were deciding, right now, whether to do something about it. Grimm's eye stalks retracted slightly. His shimmer dimmed. I meant no offense, simply making a business proposition. Fiona took a bite of her meal, chewed slowly, swallowed. Then, very calmly, "Ripple, Thorne, stand down." Both cubs immediately relaxed, returning to their previous positions. Ripple went back to begging for food scraps. Thorne resumed his nap. The threat had passed as quickly as it appeared. Fiona looked up at Grimm. "The cubs are excellent judges of character," she said pleasantly. "They don't like you. Neither do I. Walk away." Grimm's body rippled with what might have been indignation or fear. "You'll regret this. I have friends in—" "Walk. Away." Something in Fiona's voice made Grimm reconsider whatever he'd been about to say. He withdrew, sliding back into the crowd with as much dignity as an insulted slug creature could manage. Ferris let out a breath she'd been holding. "That guy's trouble." "Probably," Fiona agreed, finally letting Ripple have a piece of her protein ration. "But right now, that's his problem, not ours." She had no idea how wrong she was about that. The message arrived while Fiona was trying to convince Ripple that the potted plant in the corridor outside the mess hall was not, in fact, prey. Her personal comm chimed with the priority tone that meant someone important wanted her attention immediately, and experience had taught her that ignoring priority tones usually resulted in problems multiplying like tribbles. The message was brief, formal, and deeply concerning. "Lieutenant Fiona, your presence is requested in Ambassador Thrin's office. Level 12, Diplomatic Quarter. This matter concerns the welfare of your wards. Please attend immediately." Ferris read the message over Fiona's shoulder and whistled low. "Ambassador Thrin doesn't meet with random humans. Like, ever. She barely meets with other Falshir." "I'm aware," Fiona said, her stomach doing uncomfortable things. Ripple, sensing her tension, pressed against her leg and made a questioning chirp. Thorne had gone very still on her shoulder, which meant he was paying attention even if he pretended otherwise. "You want backup?" Ferris offered. "No, this is clan business." Fiona scratched both cubs reassuringly. "But if I'm not back in 2 hours, come looking." "With what? A tactical squad and a prayer?" "Your sparkling personality and natural charm." "We're doomed," Ferris said cheerfully. "I'll start writing your eulogy." The diplomatic quarter was everything the rest of Meridian 5 wasn't. Quiet, climate-controlled, and designed with enough redundant security to make a paranoid AI feel comfortable. Fiona passed through 3 checkpoints, each one more reluctant than the last, to let a human with 2 Falshir cubs access the ambassadorial offices. Her credentials kept clearing, though, which suggested that Thrin actually did want to see her and wasn't just luring her into some kind of elaborate diplomatic incident. Though with the way this rotation was going, that remained a possibility. Ambassador Thrin's office was designed for Falshir comfort, which meant it was roughly the size of a small warehouse and maintained at a temperature that made Fiona immediately start sweating. Everything was scaled up: furniture, doorways, the viewport that showed a stunning view of the local star system. The lighting was dim, filtered through panels that mimicked the red-orange spectrum of the Falshir homeworld's sun. Thrin herself was waiting in the center of the space, and she was impressive in the way that ancient trees are impressive. Old, solid, carrying the weight of years that had seen things no one else remembered. Her scales had faded to a pale silver gray, marked with ritual scars that denoted status and achievement. Her crystalline eyes were clouded slightly with age, but still sharp, still assessing. She wore the formal wrappings of her office, woven fabric adorned with clan markers and diplomatic seals. When Fiona entered, Thrin's gaze fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity, then shifted to Ripple and Thorne, and something complicated moved across the ambassador's expression. "Lieutenant Fiona," Thrin said, her voice deeper and more resonant than Oolix's, carrying authority like a physical weight. "The younglings, they are well?" It wasn't the opening Fiona had expected. "They're healthy, growing, learning. Oolix tells me you claimed Pack Guardian right over them, that you fought to save their lives." Thrin moved closer, her movements careful despite her size. "May I?" Fiona nodded. Thrin lowered her massive head, and both cubs immediately perked up. Ripple bounded forward, all excited energy, climbing up Thrin's foreleg to touch his snout to hers. Thorne was more reserved, but he too made the greeting gesture, acknowledging her status. Thrin's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, there was genuine warmth there. "They remember the old ways. You have taught them well." "Commander Oolix helped," Fiona admitted. "I didn't know all the cultural protocols. He's been sending me instructional files." "Of course he has," something that might have been amusement. Oolix always had a soft center beneath his warrior exterior. It is why he never achieved the rank his skills deserved. Too much compassion for command. Thrin straightened, and her tone shifted to something more formal, more concerned. "You wonder why I summoned you?" The thought crossed my mind. "There is a problem, Lieutenant. A significant one." Thrin moved to her desk, a massive slab of shaped stone, and activated a holodisplay. Images appeared, legal documents, station records, profiles of various individuals. "The pirates you stopped 6 months ago, they were part of a larger syndicate." "I figured," Fiona said, watching Ripple try to catch the holographic projections. 3 pirates in one ship doesn't make sense for that kind of operation. The syndicate has resources, political connections. They have been pressuring the Galactic Transit Authority to classify your wards as seized contraband from criminal activity. If successful, the Cubs would be auctioned off to recoup the theoretical value of the pirates' lost cargo. Fiona felt something cold settle in her stomach. "That's insane. They're living beings, not cargo." "The law, unfortunately, does not always align with morality." Thrin's tail lashed in obvious frustration. "I have fought this classification through official channels, but the syndicate has bought influence with several council members. The vote is in 3 rotation cycles, and I do not have the support to stop it." "So what happens?" Fiona's voice was tight. "They just take them? Sell them to whoever has credits?" "Unless we find an alternative legal framework." Thrin looked at her directly. "There is one option. If you were to formally adopt the Cubs under Falchir clan law, they would become your dependents. Not seized property, not orphaned wildlife. Your family, with all the legal protections that entails." Fiona blinked. "I thought I already did that. The Pack Guardian thing?" "Pack Guardian is a temporary protective status. Adoption is permanent, binding." Thrin's expression was difficult to read. "It would make you clan, Lieutenant. Not merely an ally or friend, but actual family by our oldest laws. This has never been done. No non-Falchir has ever adopted Cubs." "But it's legal?" "Legal, yes. Precedent-setting, absolutely. Controversial." Thrin's tail lashed again. "There will be those in my government who oppose this, who see it as diluting our traditions. But the law is clear, and I am willing to support it." She paused. "There is, however, a requirement." Of course there was. "What kind of requirement?" "You must undergo the proving ceremony. Demonstrate that you can protect and provide for the younglings. It is traditionally a hunt. You would need to track, capture, and present prey suitable for feeding growing cubs. A hunt, Fiona repeated. Okay, that's manageable. In a combat simulation environment, while the cubs accompany you, attempting to help. Fiona looked at Ripple, who was currently tangled in his own tail, trying to catch it. Then at Thorne, who had dozed off again despite the serious conversation happening around him. While they help. Yes. Define help. Enthusiastically interfere with your attempts to demonstrate hunting prowess, while simultaneously needing to be kept safe and managed. Thrin's tone suggested she was enjoying this slightly. It is designed to prove you can function as a parent, even under difficult circumstances. That's... Fiona stopped, started again. Actually, that's pretty reasonable. The ceremony will take place in the station's primary training facility. It can be arranged for tomorrow if you consent. Thrin leaned forward slightly. I will be direct, Lieutenant. I am offering this because Commander Oolix vouched for you. Because I have watched you with the cubs these past months through his reports. Because they chose you, and Falshire cubs do not choose lightly. Her eyes held Fiona's, but also because I am impressed. You fought pirates alone to save children who were not your species. You claimed responsibility for orphans your own kind would never understand. You have shown more honor than many who were born to our clans. Fiona felt her throat tighten. They needed someone. Yes, and you were there. Thrin straightened. Will you attempt the proving? Fiona looked at the cubs. Ripple had finally caught his tail and was chewing on it with great satisfaction. Thorne had woken up enough to judge everyone in the room and find them wanting. They were ridiculous, dangerous, expensive to feed, a constant source of chaos. They were hers. When do we start? Fiona asked. The ceremony was scheduled for the next morning, which gave Fiona exactly 1 evening to prepare and approximately 0 time to second-guess her decisions. The training facility was on Level 8, a massive space designed to simulate various combat and survival scenarios for military personnel. Thrin had reserved the entire complex, which suggested this was being taken very seriously by someone. Fiona arrived early, the cubs trailing behind her with the kind of energy that suggested they thought this was a fun outing rather than a formal ritual that would determine their legal status. Ripple was bouncing. Actually bouncing, like a puppy. Except puppies didn't have retractable claws and crystalline fangs. Thrin was waiting at the entrance, along with Oolix and 3 other Falshire who wore the formal wrappings of clan elders. They were there to witness and judge, apparently. No pressure. The rules are simple, Thrin explained. The simulation will present hunting scenarios appropriate to Falshire tradition. You must successfully complete 3 hunts while maintaining the safety and control of your wards. The cubs are expected to interfere. This is natural. Managing their enthusiasm while accomplishing your task is part of the proving. Got it, Fiona said, watching Ripple try to climb one of the elder's legs. Ripple, down. Sorry. The elder looked bemused. The young one has spirit. That's one word for it, Fiona muttered. She entered the simulation chamber with the cubs, and the doors sealed behind them. The space transformed, holographic projectors creating a realistic environment. Rocky terrain, scattered vegetation, the filtered light of a Falshire world's sun. In the distance, movement suggested prey animals, holographic constructs designed to behave like the real thing. Begin, Thrin's voice echoed through the chamber. Fiona dropped into a crouch, assessing the terrain. Beside her, Ripple immediately pounced on a rock, apparently deciding it was the enemy. Thorne sat down and began grooming himself, completely uninterested in the proceedings. "This is fine," Fiona told herself. "This is totally manageable." That's when the simulation malfunctioned, and everything went sideways. The malfunction wasn't subtle. One moment, Fiona was tracking holographic prey through simulated terrain while Ripple attacked imaginary enemies and Thorne judged the local flora. The next moment, the environmental projectors flickered, died, and were replaced by something else entirely. Something that moved with mechanical precision and had very real weapons charging with audible whines. Combat drones, military grade. 6 of them materializing from concealed panels in the walls, their targeting systems painting Fiona and the cubs with laser designators. "Simulation error!" Thrin's voice crackled through failing speakers. "Evacuate immediately!" The first drone fired. Fiona moved. Not like a cargo specialist. Not like someone who pushed freight and filed manifests. She moved like someone whose body remembered a different kind of training. Muscle memory carved deep by years of operations that never made it into official records. She rolled left, scooped Ripple mid-bounce, and came up behind cover as the energy bolt scorched the ground where she'd been standing. "Thorne! To me!" Her voice had changed, harder, colder, the voice of someone who'd given orders in situations where hesitation meant death. Thorne's eyes snapped open, both of them fully alert, and he was moving before the second syllable left her mouth. The cubs weren't playing anymore. They'd felt the shift in Fiona's demeanor, smelled the ozone from weapons discharge, understood on an instinctive level that this was real. The drones spread out, flanking maneuvers executed with programmed efficiency. Fiona's mind cataloged threats, calculated angles, assessed resources. She had no weapons, no armor, just 2 cubs who trusted her and training she'd hoped never to use again. "Listen to me," she said quietly. Both cubs pressed against her behind inadequate cover. "This is a hunt, real one. You follow my lead, you stay close, and you do exactly what I say. Understand?" Ripple's ears flattened. Thorne's tail went rigid. Both cubs made a sound, low, synchronized, the kind of sound that said they understood perfectly. Good. Fiona's eyes tracked drone movements, noting patrol patterns, weapon recharge cycles, blind spots in their sensor coverage. "Ripple, you're fast. When I move, you go left. Draw their attention. Don't engage, just make noise. Thorne, you're with me. We're going right, and we're going hard." She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She moved. What happened next would be analyzed later by station security, replayed in tactical briefings, and discussed in hushed tones by people who thought they understood combat. They didn't. Not really. Because watching a human and 2 Falshire cubs operate as a coordinated unit wasn't just effective. It was terrifying in its beauty. Ripple broke left, and suddenly, the curious, bouncing cub was gone, replaced by something that moved like liquid shadow. He didn't attack the drones. He didn't need to. He just existed in their sensor range, darting between cover, making himself impossible to target, while his presence screamed threat to their targeting algorithms. Fiona went right with Thorne, and her hands found a piece of broken simulation equipment. Metal, heavy enough. The nearest drone tracked toward Ripple's movement, and Fiona used that half-second of divided attention. She threw the metal like a javelin, not at the drone, but at the wall panel behind it. The impact triggered emergency lighting protocols, strobing illumination that confused optical sensors. Thorne didn't need to be told. He launched himself at the disoriented drone, 200 kilograms of juvenile apex predator, hitting with enough force to shatter the machine's housing. His claws found the internal mechanisms, and the drone died sparking. 5 left. The remaining drones adapted, tightening formation, compensating for the loss. But Fiona was already moving again, using terrain, using the cub's natural abilities, turning a ritual chamber into a battlefield where her opponent's advantages meant nothing. She led them through a dance of violence and precision. Ripple's speed created openings. Thorne's strength exploited them. Fiona's tactical mind orchestrated everything, reading the combat like sheet music, anticipating, adapting, surviving. When the fourth drone fell, something changed in the cub's movements. They weren't just following orders anymore. They were anticipating, reading Fiona's intentions before she voiced them, moving in perfect synchronization. Pack tactics, emerging instinctively, refined by trust. The last drone fell to a coordinated strike. Ripple's distraction, Fiona's positioning, Thorne's devastating final blow. That would have made veteran military units proud. Silence, broken only by heavy breathing and the crackling of destroyed machinery. The chamber doors exploded inward. Security personnel flooded in, weapons raised, shouting commands that Fiona barely heard through the adrenaline crash. She stood there, the cubs pressed against her legs, all three of them covered in scorch marks and machine oil, and waited for her heart rate to remember what normal felt like. The investigation took 4 hours. The truth took less time to extract once they had Grimm in custody. He'd bribed a maintenance technician, hacked the simulation protocols, intended to make it look like an accident. Tragic malfunction kills human and cubs, problem solved, exotic merchandise becomes available for salvage and sale. The syndicate he worked for had too much invested in the illegal xenofauna trade to let one human's adoption set a legal precedent. They'd underestimated her. Badly. Thrin found Fiona in the medical bay, where a frustrated doctor was trying to treat minor burns, while Ripple and Thorne refused to let anyone get too close to their guardian. "The proving is complete," Thrin said without preamble. "You passed under conditions far exceeding ritual requirements. The adoption is approved, effective immediately." Fiona looked up, exhaustion written in every line of her face. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Oolix stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in ceremonial cloth. "Though there is one more formality." He unwrapped a piece of worked metal, a clan marker engraved with symbols Fiona was still learning to read. It was beautiful, ancient, important. "You are Pack Guardian," Oolix said formally. "You are clan kin. You are family, by law, and by deed, and by choice." He fastened the marker to her jacket. "Welcome home, sister," Ripple chirped. Thorne, in a rare display of enthusiasm, headbutted Oolix hard enough to make the massive warrior stagger. Later, much later, when the paperwork was filed and the station was returning to its normal chaos, Ferris found Fiona in the observation deck. "So," Ferris said carefully, "former special operations. That's a detail you maybe could have mentioned." "It didn't seem relevant." Fiona watched ships come and go through the viewport. "That was a different life. Why'd you really do this? The cubs, I mean, the whole thing." Fiona was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I was 12 when raiders hit our colony. Killed my parents, my brother. I survived because I hid. Spent 3 days alone before rescue came." She looked at Ferris. "I know what it means to be orphaned, to be alone, to think nobody's coming for you." "Fiona, the cubs didn't just bond with me. I bonded with them. They needed someone who understood, someone who'd fight." She smiled slightly. "Turns out, I'm pretty good at fighting." "Yeah," Ferris said. "I noticed." The departure was quieter than the arrival. Word had spread about what happened. The combat, the syndicate, the adoption. Station personnel watched Fiona pass with something that looked like respect. Even Grix, at the security checkpoint, waved them through without comment, though he did nod. Once, grudgingly. Inside her ship, Fiona settled into the pilot's seat. Ripple and Thorne climbed into specially installed seats beside her, reinforced, scaled appropriately, equipped with safety harnesses that had cost a small fortune. Course set for refuge, she told them, initiating launch sequences. But we're not dropping you off. We're going home, together. Ripple made a happy chirping sound. Thorne, in his own way, purred. As the ship pulled away from Meridian 5, the narrator, who'd been watching this whole improbable story unfold, reflected on something important. Humans have a reputation across the galaxy for being pack bonders, for adopting anything that stands still long enough. Other species find it amusing, sometimes concerning, occasionally baffling. But maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe that's exactly why humanity thrives among the stars. Because they understand something other species forget. Family isn't about biology. It's about who you choose to stand with when everything goes wrong. And sometimes, the fiercest protectors are those who know what it means to lose everything. The ship jumped to FTL, carrying 1 human and 2 cubs toward whatever came next. Together.